Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When Max retired to his peaceful lakeside haven, he expected birdsong, not battle. But after a 2-week trip, he returned to find a brand new luxury garage built squarely on his land. No warning, no permission, just concrete, arrogance, and a war that was about to get very personal. After spending nearly 2 decades navigating storms and steel in the Navy's Engineering Corps, and then another 10 running land assessments up and down the Oregon coastline, I thought I'd earned a little peace. So when I retired last spring, thanks to a bum knee and enough federal paperwork to insulate a bunker, I found myself drawn to silence. I wanted space, trees, the kind of place where the only daily argument was between wind and water, and I found it. 3 acres of quiet on the northern tip of Lake Ethel, lined with pines sloping down to a still water shoreline so calm it looked like it was afraid to ripple. The house was modest, single-story cedar shake roof, big old porch out front, and an old propane stove that crackled like it had secrets. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine. Deeded, surveyed, paid in full. I had plans, nothing big. Clean up the western slope, rebuild the boat ramp. Maybe put in a workshop/garage halfway between the tree line and the house, something facing the lake where I could tinker with the outboard motor, store my tools, maybe hang a hammock for the 2 weeks of summer Oregon likes to pretend it has. I even cleared the spot back in early June, right before the 4th. Hauled out brush, flattened the soil, laid flags for utility clearance. But then a buddy from my old land registry days called in a favor, needed someone to help audit a complicated shoreline encroachment case over in Crook County. I owed him, so I packed up the truck, left a note with the mail lady, and was gone for 2 weeks. No cameras yet. I'd ordered the gear, but was waiting for a new Wi-Fi tower to go up on the South Ridge. Ironically, I'd just said to myself, what could possibly happen in 2 weeks? Famous last words. When I pulled up to my place and made the turn off the gravel road, I had to hit the brakes hard. Something was there, big, gray, squatting like a military bunker dropped from orbit. I just sat behind the wheel for a few seconds, staring through the windshield at a fully constructed 2-car garage on my land. Concrete slab, fresh, new siding, industrial-grade aluminum doors, trimmed hedges, a goddamn solar-powered sensor light mounted to the corner. It was the exact spot I'd cleared. My first thought, absurd but honest, was that maybe I'd blacked out, come back during my trip, and built it myself like a sleepwalking contractor. Then I saw the side path, crushed gravel winding off toward the neighboring development, Pine Ridge Estates. A narrow drive had been cut directly through my tree line, topped with decorative bricks. I blinked slowly, then I got out. There were still workers on site, 2 of them in reflective vests laying some kind of finishing stone at the path's edge. I approached calmly, my boots crunching on the gravel, and asked what they were building. The taller one, blonde, early 30s, looked like his knees had already given up on him, wiped sweat from his brow, and said, "Garage for the president of the HOA next door, Mrs. Blakely." My face didn't move. He added like it might help. She said this was empty ground, just overgrowth. Said the owner would probably be happy someone did something useful with it. I thanked him. I don't think he liked the way I smiled. I walked the perimeter. The pad extended cleanly across my flagged build zone. They'd even removed my utility markers. A stone path wrapped around the side like a showpiece. It wasn't just a garage, it was a trophy. And it was on my land. I didn't shout. I didn't argue. I didn't even tell the workers who I was. Instead, I got back in my truck, drove up to the house, made a pot of coffee, pulled out my file box, and laid the deed on the table next to the latest GPS survey I'd run in May. Then I opened my laptop, pulled up the parcel overlays, and cross-referenced with the county GIS data. I clicked through to Google Earth and pulled the historical aerials, clear as day. My lot, undisturbed until this month. My hand hovered over the mouse. Then I opened my notepad and wrote 6 words in big black letters. Karen, thank you for the garage. That night, I didn't sleep. Not because I was angry. I wasn't. I was calculating. By dawn, I had a plan, and it didn't involve shouting matches or neighborhood drama. No, I'd spent too many years in the military and too many more in land law to be dragged into someone else's tantrum. I was going to solve this my way, quietly, efficiently, and with the kind of surgical precision that would make a tax auditor weep with pride. First step, call the contractor back. I remembered the name stitched into the shirt of one of the guys from the day before, Riverstone Builds, small, local outfit. I found their number online and called around 7 a.m. A sleepy voice answered, and I introduced myself as the property owner of the land on Lake Ethel where they'd just finished a garage. The pause was long enough I could hear his morning coffee dripping in the background. "Oh," he said finally. "You're the guy?" "I'm the guy," I confirmed. "And I'd like to hire you." There was a much shorter pause after that. 3 hours later, the same crew that built Karen's architectural vanity project was back, but this time, they were working for me. I met them at the tree line, showed them the deed, the GPS overlays, and printed copies of the property boundaries certified by the county. No one asked questions. I told them to fence in the structure all the way around, leaving no access from the outside. 12-foot panels, double-post steel. I wanted motion detectors on all 4 corners, infrared cameras pointed at every angle, and floodlights triggered by footsteps. I wasn't just fencing a garage, I was establishing dominance, legally speaking. The crew got to work immediately. They didn't ask who Karen was or what this meant. They were professionals, and I was now their paying client. One of them chuckled quietly as he installed the first motion detector above the garage door. "This might be the most polite land war I've ever seen," he said. I just nodded. While they built, I went into town and paid for 2 laminated signs with bold, weatherproof lettering. "Private property, no trespassing. Owner enforces rights under Oregon law." The second one said simply, "Built without permission now under new management." By evening, the entire garage was surrounded. The access path from the Pine Ridge estate side was now blocked by reinforced gates with a keypad lock, and I changed the code hourly just for fun. Every angle was covered. Every legal box was checked. That night, I filed a notice of land use dispute with the county, posted a scanned copy to the Public Records Board, and emailed it to the HOA address listed on their website. The subject line, "Unauthorized structure on Parcel 34C, ownership in dispute." I included time-stamped images from the build site, my deed, the parcel overlay, and a notarized statement outlining the timeline. I also called my old friend Pete, a retired zoning officer, and asked him to come by later that week for a quiet inspection. He owed me a bottle of scotch anyway. The cherry on top, I installed a solar-powered loudspeaker at the main gate that triggered when motion was detected and played a simple recorded message. "You are entering private property. Structure belongs to the landowner. No access permitted without written authorization." Simple, polite, devastating. I didn't sleep that night either, but this time it wasn't calculation keeping me up. It was anticipation. The next morning broke with the kind of crisp Oregon sunlight that made the pine needles glisten like glass. I was standing on my porch with a mug of strong coffee, watching the mist lift off the lake, when I heard the tires. Soft at first, but unmistakable, a certain urgency in the gravel crunching under an SUV that doesn't belong. I knew before I saw the car who it was. A pearl-white Lexus RX rolled up to the edge of my newly installed fence, stopping so abruptly the dust caught up a second later. The driver's side door flung open and out stormed a woman dressed like she'd just finished yelling at someone at the town council. Perfect posture, perfect hair, and the unmistakable squint of someone not used to being told no. Karen B. in the flesh. She marched straight to the gate, the one with the laminated private property sign, and stood there staring at the keypad like it had personally insulted her. Then she looked up at the cameras. Then she saw the speaker, the motion sensor triggered, and my recorded voice played loud and clear. "You are entering private property. Structure belongs to the landowner. No access permitted without written authorization." Karen actually took a step back. She wasn't expecting a voice from heaven. Then, predictably, she started yelling. "I want this fence removed immediately. This is outrageous. You're blocking my garage." I stepped off my porch, still holding the mug. I didn't rush. I walked like I had all the time in the world, which, to be honest, I did. She was already halfway through her second tirade by the time I reached the fence line. "You can't just seize someone else's building like a warlord. I paid for this structure. I have invoices." I stopped a few feet from the gate and smiled politely. "Morning, Karen. Beautiful day, isn't it?" Her lips thinned into a white line. "What exactly do you think you're doing?" "I'm standing on my land," I said simply, sipping my coffee. "Same land you built that lovely garage on without asking." I figured I should protect it. You know perfectly well this plot was empty. Nobody was using it. And your house is all the way up the hill. I reached into my jacket and pulled out a folder. Inside was a stack of documents: deed, GIS maps, county overlays, and satellite photos. I held one up against the fence so she could see the bright red outline of Parcel 34C wrapping snugly around her shiny new garage. This entire area, the garage, the gravel, the footpath, all fall within my surveyed property lines. I have public records, aerial imagery, and the county's geospatial layers to back it up. You built on my land, Karen, she actually sputtered. I had no idea. I was told this was unclaimed. I was told. By whom? I asked. Because I've lived here almost a year, and I'm fairly certain nobody asked me. She folded her arms, switching tactics like she was playing poker with someone who'd memorized the deck. Regardless, I am the president of Pine Ridge Estates, and that garage is legally attached to a registered improvement plan under the HOA Development Code. You can't just fence it off like some highwayman. I grinned. Karen, thank you for the garage. It's exactly what I wanted. 2 bays, lake view, concrete slab. You really outdid yourself. I mean it. Her jaw moved, but no sound came out. Then she found her footing again and pulled out her phone. I'm calling the police. This is theft. You'll be arrested for vandalism and unlawful seizure. Please do, I said, already pulling out my own phone. You want local or state? She scowled and walked back to her SUV, already barking at someone on the line. I waited. About 20 minutes later, a black and white patrol SUV pulled into my drive. 2 officers stepped out, one older, gray at the temples, the other young and cautious, still probably living off energy drinks and policy briefings. I waved and met them halfway. Karen stormed toward them like she was about to give a TED Talk on victimhood. That man, she pointed, has illegally locked me out of a building I commissioned with my own money. I demand access, and I demand that this trespass be addressed immediately. The older officer turned to me. Sir, what's your side of this? I handed over the folder. My name's Max Dell. I own Parcel 34C. This structure was built on my land while I was out of town. I didn't authorize it, approve it, or sign off on any permits. When I returned, I verified ownership and secured the structure pending a full investigation. I've also filed a land dispute notification with the county. The officer flipped through the documents. Deed, map, satellite imagery. You've got county coordinates too. Down to the inch, I said, tapping the GIS overlay. I worked in this field for 10 years. Karen looked like she'd swallowed a lemon. The younger officer walked to the garage and confirmed the boundary marker. Yep, all inside the posted property line. Cameras are legal, fence is legal, no indication of damage or vandalism. Karen turned red. But I paid for it. The older officer looked at her, measured and calm. Ma'am, if this is indeed his land, and all documents say it is, then anything constructed without a legal agreement or permit is technically a civil matter, not criminal. You may have to resolve this in court. You're siding with him. We're siding with the law, ma'am. Karen stood frozen, fists clenched, like she was holding herself together with sheer rage. She gave me one last venomous look. This isn't over. I raised my mug again, looking forward to the sequel. For the next 2 days, my property was quieter than it had been in months. Even the birds seemed to give the place a little extra space, as if they too sensed something nuclear had just barely been averted. Karen hadn't returned? Not physically, at least, but I knew that didn't mean she was done. A woman like her doesn't retreat. She regroups. On the morning of the 3rd day, I woke up to find a man in a windbreaker crouching near the base of one of my fence posts. He had a clipboard, a measuring tape, and the cautious posture of someone who thought they were invisible but hadn't quite committed to the role. I stepped onto the porch in my bathrobe and called out, "You lost friend." He stood up quickly, startled, and fumbled for a badge on a lanyard. "County Compliance Inspector," he said, holding it up. The badge looked legit enough, though he didn't seem too thrilled to be flashing it. We received a complaint regarding unpermitted fencing and possible code violations. Did you now? I sipped my coffee. Was the complaint anonymous, or did it come with lipstick and a HOA seal? He cleared his throat, uncomfortable. "I'm just here to document, sir." "Well, you're standing on my property," I said, walking down the steps, "which you're free to do, so long as you log it and I get a copy of whatever you file." That caught him off guard. Most folks, I assume, don't cite municipal code before 8 a.m. He took a few more notes, then gestured vaguely at the garage. There was also a mention of unpermitted permanent structures built in a residential buffer zone. Oh yes, I smiled. That would be the garage someone else built on my land without permission. You'll find it's been formally disputed and reported to your office. File number 71A, under Dell versus Pine Ridge Development Encroachment. The man's pen froze mid-scratch. He blinked once. Oh, that's this. That's this, I confirmed. He excused himself shortly after that. I watched him walk off, shoulders slumped a little. He'd clearly expected an overgrown recluse with a barbed wire fetish, not a retired surveyor with every legal document ready to go. That same afternoon, I decided it was time to move things forward. I drafted 3 formal notices, one to the county's Department of Building and Land Use, one to the Property Tax Assessor's Office, and one to the State Licensing Board for General Contractors. In each, I included scanned documentation of the unauthorized construction, photographs of the build zone, statements from the construction crew, and screenshots from Google Earth showing my original clearing. I asked for a formal audit of the build permits involved and the contractor license used. I knew damn well Karen hadn't gone through the proper channels. She was the type to bully first, paperwork later, or never. 2 days later, I got a phone call from the building department. A soft-spoken woman named Lisa informed me that, indeed, no permits had been pulled for a structure on my parcel, or adjacent parcels for that matter. In fact, there had been no recorded construction of any kind associated with my address in the past 12 months. She thanked me for the documentation and said an inspector would be dispatched to verify the encroachment and issue any necessary code violation orders. I smiled as I hung up. One domino down. That evening, I found a sealed manila envelope taped to my mailbox. No postage, no return address, just my name, written in careful block letters. Inside was a typed letter on HOA letterhead, unsigned, with vague legal threats about damages incurred through unreasonable obstruction, unneighborly conduct, and disruption of community planning efforts. The kicker was a line that read, "Your refusal to cooperate may result in escalated legal and civic consequences." The word civic was underlined 3 times. I framed it and hung it inside the garage. Figured it deserved to be admired. The next day, 2 men came to my door. They weren't from the county. One was in his late 50s, the other younger, both wearing golf shirts with the Pine Ridge Estates logo embroidered over their hearts like some kind of suburban militia. They introduced themselves as members of the HOA board and said they'd like to de-escalate the situation amicably. I invited them to sit on the porch. They tried small talk first. One asked about the lake trout population, the other complimented the fence. Then they pivoted. "There's been a bit of confusion," the older one said, folding his hands. "It seems our president acted under some mistaken assumptions about jurisdictional boundaries." "Mistaken?" I asked. "That's one word for it." "Look, Mr. Dell, we understand this was irregular," the younger one cut in, "but surely there's a way to resolve this without dragging it through the courts." I leaned forward. "You want me to just hand over the garage?" They shifted, but neither denied it. "Nope," I said, standing. "Garage stays. Fence stays. Everything Karen did, she did without my consent and in violation of about 5 county regulations. I've already filed. It's out of my hands now." The older one sighed. "You understand this will create tension in the neighborhood." "I'm not in your neighborhood," I said, and smiled. "I just happen to own the land next to it." They left without another word. That night, I set up a new motion-activated floodlight near the access gate from Pine Ridge, bright enough to give migraines. Petty? Maybe. Legal? Absolutely. The silence didn't last. It never does with people like Karen. They don't retreat. They reload. About a week after the HOA emissaries tried their smooth-talking routine on my porch, things started getting weird. It began with a clerk from the county GIS office calling me. Someone I knew, actually. Trina, mid-30s, sharp as a box cutter, and just as fast when someone tried to mess with land records. She sounded puzzled. "Hey, Max," she said. "Quick question. Did you recently request an edit to the boundary overlay for parcel 34C? I nearly laughed. "Nope. Why?" "Well, we got a submission this morning. Someone filed a correction claiming that the section where the garage stands is actually part of Pine Ridge Common Grounds. It came with an old scanned survey. Looks like it was drawn up on a napkin by a drunk raccoon. Who submitted it? She paused. Didn't say, but the name on the scanned signature is K. Blakely. Of course it was. I asked Trina to flag the submission and attach my dispute claim. She promised to escalate it to her supervisor, who owed me more than one favor from back in my mapping days. After we hung up, I sat at my kitchen table and stared at the wall for a moment. Karen had actually tried to alter the parcel map. That wasn't bold. That was straight up stupid. I sent a certified letter to the county clerk's office with the updated boundary files, a notarized affidavit, and a thumb drive containing time-stamped GPS logs, dated photographs of the lot, and overlays from Google Earth. I even attached a copy of the ridiculous submission just for contrast. The cover page read, "Attempted falsification of land records under ORS 164.075 for your review." Then 2 nights later, my motion sensors pinged me awake at 2:17 a.m. I groaned, reached for my phone, and pulled up the camera feed. There, bathed in the sharp white glow of my floodlights, stood a man, mid-20s maybe, wearing a hoodie and jeans, struggling with the lock on the west gate. He had bolt cutters. I watched, stunned for a second, as he clipped once, twice, and then ducked out of frame. I pulled on my boots, grabbed the small black case from under the couch, and headed outside. By the time I made it to the gate, he was gone. But the lock was snapped, and the side panel had been nudged open. I called the sheriff's office, gave them the time, direction he ran, and pulled a still frame from the video that showed the idiot's license plate as he parked his dusty black Nissan along the edge of Pine Ridge. The responding officer arrived within 15 minutes. Same guy from the earlier incident. He watched the footage, took the broken lock as evidence, and thanked me for making his job easy. I didn't press charges just yet, but I filed an incident report. In the morning, I planned to do some digging. And dig I did. By noon, I knew who the man was. Logan Blakely, Karen's nephew. Lives 2 blocks away, delivery driver, not especially bright. I got the info from a neighbor across the lake. An old fishing buddy who grew up with the Blakely clan and still heard things through the grapevine. Karen had probably handed him a 50 and told him to deal with the fence situation. The next day, I drove into town and met with a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, Elizabeth Durant, specialist in real estate fraud, encroachment, and civil liability. The kind of woman who could recite zoning codes in her sleep and once countersued a HOA into bankruptcy. I handed her my entire folder. She smiled as she flipped through it. "Mr. Dell, this is one of the cleanest cases of hostile encroachment I've ever seen. You want to sue for damages?" "I want to sue for everything," I said. "And I want her to remember it every time she sees a garage." Done. We filed a multi-claim suit the next morning. Count 1, illegal construction on private land. Count 2, property damage. The initial grading had torn up part of my native slope. Count 3, trespassing with intent to deceive, thanks to Logan. Count 4, emotional distress. Hell, I hadn't slept a full night in 2 weeks. Count 5, fraudulent attempt to alter government records. That one was the showstopper. We requested damages totaling $215,000, including legal fees and land restoration costs. The court accepted the filing without a blink. Karen's attorney was served at her door the following evening, which I know because the process server texted me a photo of her face when she opened it. She looked like someone had handed her a dead skunk on a silver platter. I didn't celebrate. Not yet. But I did go down to the garage, open the big bay doors, and sit inside for a while. It was quiet in there, cold too, still smelled like concrete dust and bitter pine. But I looked around and smiled. Karen had built me one hell of a courtroom exhibit. It didn't take long for Karen to hit back. The woman was allergic to accountability. 3 days after she was served, I received a thick manila envelope slid under my front gate. Inside was a stack of documents, half of them printed crooked and riddled with vague legalese, all of them laughable. She was filing a counterclaim, accusing me of unlawful seizure, intentional obstruction of community property, and my personal favorite, public humiliation leading to reputational harm. I didn't even bother calling my lawyer. I just scanned the whole mess and emailed it to Liz Durant with the subject line, "Clown Show, Act 2. She replied 5 minutes later, "Let's shut it down." Hard. And we did. At the preliminary hearing, Karen showed up wearing a cream-colored pantsuit and a smug little smile that screamed, "I'm the victim here." Her attorney Some sunken-chested man with too much gel and not enough evidence shuffled behind her like he'd already lost. Liz, on the other hand, walked in like she owned the floor. Dark suit, no nonsense. She laid out everything. My deed and updated surveys, the building code violations, a notarized timeline of events, the complaint logs, and, of course, Logan's attempt to break in, backed by security footage and the police report. The judge, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s with reading glasses perched like a weapon, listened for about 20 minutes before raising a hand. "Mrs. Blakely," she said, "can you provide any documentation showing you had the right to build on Mr. Dell's property?" Karen's attorney looked panicked. Karen opened her mouth. "I was told by a previous board president that this area was under HOA jurisdiction. There was a verbal agreement with the developer." "Verbal?" the judge repeated deadpan. "You're claiming ownership of a permanent structure based on an alleged conversation with someone who is no longer in office and not the property owner." "Well, yes, but—" The judge raised her hand again. "Stop. I've heard enough." The counterclaim was dismissed with prejudice before lunch, but that wasn't the main event. That was just the appetizer. Over the next several weeks, Liz and I built a wall of evidence so solid you could have parked a tank on it. We brought in the contractor's receipts under Karen's name. We got sworn statements from the workers she'd hired, confirming she'd claimed the land was community open space and told them to build fast and don't ask questions. We subpoenaed HOA meeting minutes and found no formal vote had ever taken place regarding any garage project. It was all Karen. She'd gone rogue. Then we pulled the ace. Trina from the GIS office confirmed, on record, that Karen had attempted to alter land records by submitting false documentation. That alone was a third-degree felony under Oregon statute. The DA wasn't likely to press charges, it wasn't big enough to chase, but it gave the judge plenty of reasons to throw the entire weight of the case against her. The court date came, and I sat in the front row while Liz took center stage. She was surgical. By the time she finished her opening statement, Karen was already fidgeting like someone who'd accidentally sat on a beehive. Her lawyer tried objecting to just about everything, but it was like watching a man try to stop a freight train with a salad fork. And then it was my turn. I took the stand, swore in, and told the whole story. From the first morning I found the garage to the moment Karen's nephew tried to cut my locks in the dark. I spoke clearly. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't even let myself enjoy it. But I did lock eyes with Karen once, just to see if anything in her expression resembled regret. It didn't. When Liz asked me why I hadn't just taken the fence down and handed over the building, I said, because I believe in boundaries, physical, legal, and moral, and Karen Blakely crossed all three. The courtroom was silent for a moment after that. Karen didn't testify. Her lawyer claimed it would be unnecessary and inflammatory, but I suspect he knew she'd sink them even faster with her mouth open. They tried to argue that I had benefited unfairly by gaining a valuable structure, as if I'd just woken up one morning and wished a luxury garage onto my lot like some kind of magical squatter's genie. But Liz shut that down too. Even if my client did benefit, she said, he didn't ask for it. He didn't authorize it. And under Oregon law, any structure erected without the consent of the landowner becomes part of that landowner's property. This was not a gift. It was a trespass with nails and concrete. We rested our case. The judge took 2 days to deliberate. I spent those days chopping firewood and pretending I wasn't pacing a rut into my living room floor. Then the verdict came in full. The court awarded me full ownership of the structure, confirmed via title amendment. Karen was ordered to pay $215,000 in damages, including restoration costs, legal fees, and punitive penalties for the fraudulent GIS submission. The HOA, while not officially liable, received a separate judicial recommendation to conduct a full internal audit of all HOA-led property improvements over the past 5 years. The ruling would be made public in county records. When I stepped out of the courthouse, Liz nudged me. Not bad for a guy who just wanted to build a boat shed. I laughed. Yeah, shame I had to accept one fully furnished. The aftermath came in waves. Karen didn't show up to the final filing. Her attorney did, pale, silent, sweating into his collar, and signed the stipulations with the grace of a man begging for the curtain to drop. The county clerk stamped everything with that satisfying mechanical chunk, and just like that, it was over. Legally, at least. But if Karen thought the damage would stop there, she hadn't done the math. First came the local paper, a headline right above a school board scandal. HOA president fined over illegal garage built on neighbor's land. My name wasn't in the title, but it was all over the article. And so was hers. They even used a photo of the garage behind my new black fence, with the private property sign square in the center of the shot, like a mic drop. Then came the fallout inside Pine Ridge Estates. At their next HOA meeting, Karen showed up flanked by 2 remaining loyalists, only to be met by a room full of furious residents. Turns out when the court ordered a full audit of HOA projects, people started digging, and they did not like what they found. A playground renovation that never passed a vote. A landscaping deal that mysteriously cost 3 times what was budgeted. A community events fund that paid for a wine tasting weekend Karen and 2 board members took in Napa. By the time the floor was open to public comments, the room was boiling. And by the time a vote of no confidence was called, Karen didn't even bother to raise her hand. She was removed from her position unanimously, effective immediately. Her house was listed on Zillow 2 weeks later. Motivated seller, priced to move. A neighbor told me she'd already packed most of her stuff and was staying with her sister in Bend until the noise died down. The noise, I assumed, being the collective roar of 100 homeowners realizing they'd been ruled by a walking HOA fever dream. As for me, well, things changed. Slowly, then all at once. I started getting nods from neighbors I hadn't even met. People waved from their driveways as I drove past. One guy from the other side of the lake brought over a homemade blackberry pie with a note that just said, "Thank you for standing up to her. We were all too damn tired." I'd never set out to be a local hero. I just wanted my land respected. But now, somehow, I was the man who took down Karen B., and not just Karen, but everything she'd built her little HOA kingdom on. Intimidation, ambiguity, and just enough paperwork to keep people confused, but not informed. About a month after the ruling, I got a letter in the mail. Thick envelope, fancy letterhead. Inside was an invitation to the Pine Ridge Estates interim HOA election and community picnic. The new board had been formed temporarily, and they wanted friends of the community to attend and say a few words. I laughed for a full minute. Still, I went. Not as a member, of course. I wasn't part of the HOA. Had no interest in being part of the HOA, and would rather swim naked in the lake in February than ever serve on a neighborhood board. But I showed up. Jeans, flannel, thermos of coffee, and a simple idea in my back pocket. I walked past the potluck tables, past the kids chasing each other with juice boxes, and straight up to the mic when they called my name. I cleared my throat and looked out over the small sea of folding chairs and sun hats. "I'm not really one of you," I started. "I don't live inside Pine Ridge. I live next to it. But for a while, our worlds collided. Violently." Nervous laughter rippled across the crowd. "I didn't come here to gloat. I came here to say this. What happened? The lawsuit, the garage, all of it, wasn't just about land. It was about boundaries, and respecting them. Legal ones, personal ones, human ones." I saw a few heads nod. A woman near the front dabbed her eyes with a tissue. "You don't need to be afraid of your HOA," I continued. "It's not meant to be a weapon. It's supposed to be a tool, a way to manage things together. Don't let anyone turn it into something else." When I stepped down, they applauded. Not a standing ovation, thank God, but sincere. Afterward, a man named Tom, now acting board president, came up to me and shook my hand. "We're rewriting the bylaws," he said, "starting from scratch. This time, people will actually vote." I told him that sounded like a damn good idea. The very next weekend, I put up a new sign on the garage, a brushed aluminum plate, etched in bold serif lettering. It read, "Built by HOA, owned by me." I bolted it right above the garage doors, square and level. A neighbor walked by as I was finishing and chuckled. "Bit cheeky, huh?" I shrugged. "Just the truth." A few months passed. The trees turned copper and gold. The lake cooled into glass, and the birds began flying south in quiet, confident zzzz. Life returned to something close to normal. Or at least what passes for normal after you've been dragged through a neighborhood legal war and come out the other side with someone else's garage. The town moved on. The HOA restructured. Karen was gone. Not a whisper, not a postcard, not even one of those passive-aggressive Facebook rants she used to post like clockwork every Sunday night. Just silence. Blessed, heavy silence. I finished converting the garage into something more useful. The North Bay became my full-service workshop. Pegboard wall, reinforced workbench, a new set of Milwaukee tools I'd been putting off buying for years. The South Bay, the one with the better lake view, became a place of peace. A hand-built cedar canoe hanging from the rafters, an old hammock stretched corner to corner, and a speaker mounted on the wall that played nothing but instrumental jazz and the occasional Gordon Lightfoot album. Sometimes I'd sit there for hours, not doing anything in particular, just being. I also replaced the keypad lock on the main gate. The new one synced to my phone, logs every entry attempt, and flashes a red light if the wrong code's entered more than twice. Not that I expected Karen to come skulking back. But I believe in closure. Sometimes closure means a heartfelt apology. Sometimes it means a steel-reinforced deadbolt and a Bluetooth signal. One morning in early November, I got a knock at the door. I opened it to find a man in a gray suit holding a clipboard. He looked like the type who got nervous if his coffee came with the wrong lid. "Mr. Dell," he asked. "That's me. I'm from the county assessor's office, just here to finalize the reassessment of your improved property." He meant the garage. Of course. I invited him in, offered him coffee, and showed him the structure. He took notes, measured, nodded politely. As he wrapped up, he said, "Strange case, this one. Been the talk of the office. You know how rare it is for someone to win both title and damages in these kinds of disputes." I smiled. "Guess I just got lucky." He chuckled and shook his head. "No, sir. You got even." After he left, I stood in the driveway for a long while, staring at the garage. It stood there like a monument now. Clean lines, solar lights, cameras blinking gently every few seconds. Not flashy, not loud, just steady. Later that evening, I climbed into my canoe and pushed off from the dock, letting the lake carry me toward the middle as the sun dropped behind the ridge. I looked back at the house, my house, and that solid gray structure sitting comfortably inside its fence, like it had always belonged to me. The irony never left me. I didn't build the garage, but I paid the price for it, not in cash, but in patience, precision, and a kind of moral resolve you don't expect to need after retirement. And yet here I was, proud owner of the most legally contentious shed in Oregon. Right before I paddled back, I caught movement at the far side of the lake. A dark SUV pulled to a stop at the edge of Pine Ridge's private drive. Someone got out, female silhouette, short blonde hair, just stood there, watching. She didn't cross the boundary. She didn't even step onto the gravel. Just looked from a distance, like a ghost pressed up against the edge of a world that no longer welcomed her. I didn't wave. I didn't have to. I drifted back home as the last light faded and the moon rose over the evergreens, a soft breeze rustling the tall grass at the shoreline. The cameras blinked, the door locks clicked, and the house stood calm and silent in the darkness. All mine. And right there, on the garage door, polished by the night air, my favorite words gleamed beneath the motion light. Built by HOA. Owned by me. Right below that, a smaller sign I'd recently added, private property. Build at your own risk.